that's another way to do it on a day-to-day basis. But I do feel the need. It feels shallow. It feels, that I'm too aware that I've been into higher dimensional space, and I don't need to go there all the time, like on the 5-MeO. And I've only done the 5-MeO. 5-MeO was chapter 7 of the book, and then I did it again in chapter 9. Actually, I did end DMT in chapter 9, but it was exactly the same white light tunnel, because I was so vibrationally still at the same space. But ayahuasca, I do try to, is part of my life, and I do try to do it irregularly a few times a year when the need is there. And it's not something, you need to have any pressure over, but it's just when I feel the need for the medicine, then I take the medicine, yeah.
Yeah, the practice in general, it can be the meditation, and I always like to tell people it's not a silver bullet. You're not going to go down and drink ayahuasca or smoke DMT and everything's going to be hunky-dory and you've seen God and you're an enlightened being. I've been on a path for years and I still struggle with being human and screwing up and not doing the things I should be doing, that I know are part of the medicine path. And when I do get back to that, and it's not about chasing the dragon or chasing that fix, it's about the reconnection. It almost defrags your hard drive, if you want to look at it that way. It just realigns everything, and it's not even just about the chakras. You can literally feel the information getting pulled off your electrical circuit. And so I think it's important to have that, not necessarily to go back and to actually have to go through the ayahuasca experience every time. I know people that sit and just look over, or actually sitting and watching this and hearing some of Guillermo singing tonight. I first drank with Guillermo, who was in the film, and I saw spaceships coming back, and I was in the back corner there. So it can just be a song, and sometimes it can just be sitting still and getting into yourself, but this isn't going to solve all the world's issues. It can definitely help a lot of people. It can help psychological scars, physical, and it can cover the whole range, but I think it's important to know that it's got to be a practice, It's got to be some sort of practice. It doesn't mean you have to be back and taking the sacrament all the time, but I think you're right. When you have that calling, you almost know, okay, I've got to reconnect. I've got to plug back in a little bit.
Can you speak to community a little bit?
Absolutely. Good question. Thank you. A couple things about community. I think what I was saying earlier, having this open space to be able to... Are you messing with me, man? Oh my God, here comes the DMT. Pumping through the air conditioning. I felt extremely lonely the first time that I had my DMT experience, and I did not have any sort of framework. I mean, it shattered everything, and I felt isolated. And there was not a way for me to... It was the only compound or drug that I ever put in my body I didn't want to put in my body again until I knew more about it and started to go out online and trying to find people that had had these experiences because then I didn't sound so crazy. And I could sit down and have a discussion and say, when I saw that green being, it also elicited this emotional response and it took me back to being a 5-year-old child where blah, 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 blah. And when you can do that in the comfort and safety of a group that understands, we can grow a lot more as a culture. I mean, individually, we can kind of take over ourselves again and not have the world out there determining who we are, but we can kind of redetermine that ourselves, but the community has to kind of be there. Otherwise, I think it's easy to get lost out there, and that's one of the things about psychedelics that people are always cautious of or pointing, there's all those red flags. Oh my gosh, everyone's going to go crazy and the hippies are out running around and blah, 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 blah. But if you have that community there and you're treating it with respect, you have the set and setting, which is key to having an amazing experience, but then also that reintegration. You're not going to talk to yourself. It's important to have people around you, elders that you can bounce ideas off of and trying to get some loose interpretation or even just kind of comfort with what you have experienced. And it has been so great that question came from you, Ken. Ken has been a great community member for me to bounce a lot of ideas off of, and he's been like, yeah, sounds great. So thank you.
I'd just like to add that also, as the ayahuasca movement, I guess, sort of blossoms in the West, it might still be underground, but there is a real sense of community because we're sharing the experiences we've had, but we're also learning. And so many people that I first drank with in 2006, I still know, I'm in contact with, and I meet as I travel around the world. And so there's something like, they say, the shorthand, something like 10% of all the travelers down to Iquitos were going for ayahuasca, although that's probably increased quite a lot now since 2006 originally. But out of that 10%, there was like another 10% who stayed on the medicine path. And, they would not just be drinking medicine for their own healing, but they would have this resonance with it that they wanted to work with the medicine and coming back into their communities all around the world who were also in need of healing. I mean, there's no real point in trying to go over to some other country and be a healer there in a foreign environment. It's like a friend of mine says, wherever you are in the world, you're directly above the center of the earth. And it's like everyone is a nodal point for their own community for healing if they're drawn to that medicine path. And I see, these ayahuasca communities all around the world growing, and they're very beautiful because they're a container for spirit and for this real old-style tribal village sort of connection of something that's on the inside, something that really connects. It isn't that we all barrack for the same football team or live in the same suburb or have exterior things which distinguish us as a community. There's this connection of the soul. And so that connection of the soul and this global community is really blossoming all across the world. I liken it to the slow food movement, that it's almost invisible, It's not pushing up against the establishment in a way which causes an equal and opposite reaction to crack down, although, there is some element of that. But it's across all demographics, gender, socioeconomic things. It's people. I've drunk with, 70, 80-year-old people. I've drunk with teenagers, been in ceremonies with young kids in Peru, and just as people you would never expect who are doing it. And it's almost like this, as I say in the film, the Seekers. It's like this mystery cult. It's all of you. It's all of us who have been touched by the vine and by the deeper spirituality that it opens within ourselves. And this community is blossoming, and I have great faith that it's going to do something just by its very presence, by being shifted vibrationally and being open to these spaces and this remembrance which is happening within us to really shift the paradigm, because the world we're living in, or the paradigm we're living in, is failing us and it's on the way out. The world age is ending, all the old cultures are saying. We have these understanding of cyclic time, and we're seeing the ecological devastation, the financial collapse, the political collapse, the lack of will in the hierarchical power structures which have dominated in his story for so long in history, right? And so this blossoming of community all around the world, of spiritual community, whether that's from entheogens or just from other modalities or from living in the heart, is really the future. And it's full circle from whence we came, So community is really, for me, psychedelic, entheogenic, whatever. It's really where it's at, because that transcends politics.
You are here in this room with us, and we're here in this room with you. And at risk of rehashing something that Terence McKenna said in the 80s, this is perhaps the best self-selecting group that we could hope for. I don't know most of you. And by virtue of your being here, I would like to. Community starts with a hug or a handshake. I guess a handshake if you're not quite sure. And it's built organically, gradually. It's reinforced over time by having difficult experiences together. There really is something that I resonated with in the film about knowing someone on a deeper than personal level when you've been through the shit together, and here we are, in large part, I think all of us identify with one or another oppressed minority, because everyone has that. Everyone has that. Even the billionaires are locked up in their mansions with their armed guards because they're afraid of other people, you know. So I just really encourage all of you who, like me, probably, just statistically, grew up in a nuclear family, a dysfunctional nuclear family, in the suburbs, you know, kind of like swatted if you tried to talk to the kids next to you in school. We have like all of this programming that we need to overcome in order to even like remedially develop the kind of community that all of us are craving. So I know that they have to, you know, close this theater at midnight, but let's make sure that we stay in touch and that we continue to you know, be present to one another and to support one another and to make ourselves available and to acknowledge that we're available to one another.
I just wanted to acknowledge how beautifully the graphics and everything you interwove, such a wonderful expression of the film to what you were narrating, the story that you were bringing to life. And I do have a question: what's the process of putting this out into the world for you? This is a premiere, and can you tell us a little bit about what's happening with the film?
I'm winging it as I go.
True independence.
The really funny thing is this has been a 7.5-year journey for me since I first went down to Peru to do a 3,000-word article, right? Freelance, no money up front. And it just went deeper and deeper. But when I'd had the experience, it was in me and I had to get it down on paper. I had all the notes. But I never intended to make the film. But it's been such a beautiful, organic experience, because on the first book tour of the book in San Francisco in 2009 with Tim Parrish, the director of the film and editor of the film, and Lulu Medill, his partner, who does all the sound design and soundscapes, we hit upon this way of doing spoken word extract from the book, which is essentially the narration you hear in the film, with photos and VJ sort of effects and audio soundscapes in a live audio-visual mashup, almost like what Michael and Tofu were doing. And so the film just birthed itself, you know, and it's continuing to birth itself. So this is the 5th city, Austin, that I've toured the film in this US tour. There's 5 more to go, but I really encourage all of you to be seeds for the film if you like it and you resonate with the message, to help spread the message of it and the availability of it. It's on video on demand and it's on DVD on Amazon, aya-awakenings.com. We're looking for distribution, and I believe that it's, you know, there's a, as I said before about community, in the ayahuasca community and the DMT community and the psychedelic sort of underground. It's a lot bigger than we think. You know, because it's been underground, we're not allowed to have a census. We're not allowed to have this idea of exactly how many of us are out there, or indeed, you know, even in the last few years, how many more of us, how big it's grown, because the times are psychedelic. You know, the world is fully trippy these days. Everything that's being invented and coming in the way we're having to cope and adapt to it. So I really, the films, you know, Mitchell probably understand this. It's like an entity. It's like a baby. You know, it's like this entity which you've created, and it's just taking its first steps. It's just going out into the world, and I'm hoping it will continue to take those steps and to learn to walk and to run and to fly. And it needs you to do that. Thank you. Sort of depends what experience you're talking about exactly.
Michael playing God, I love it. If I may just kind of riff off that too, because when I put my film out and starting to take these ideas and look for investment, to raise money for an independent documentary is hard, but then when you start throwing in psychedelics, people tend to run the other way. But we amassed an amazing collection of content. And there are a lot of other people, like Rack, and a whole slew of other people, and artists and filmmakers that are doing this stuff. And there's a lot of work out there. And we want to throw it out there to the community to start doing their own things. So they can make films out of recognized content or some of Michael's work, any number of things and like this big mishmash, and we can start to have that dialogue that we need to have, this multi-dimensional dialogue, instead of just having the hour-and-a-half film. It really does kind of live and breathe on its own, and once you put out an hour or 100 hours worth of interview footage, it's much more powerful than the 1% that we use in the film. So it's neat. It is kind of like, go walk, get it going. But well, what I started to realize with DMT is just kind of what I was alluding to. I could not, after looking at that footage for 2 years, it would have probably been a 75-hour film. Thank God I have a good editor. And what we realized is that collection of content shouldn't sit in a vault. It shouldn't. These are brilliant people. They've been published. They've got their credibility, and it should be out there to the world. So even if it's just for somebody to come online and look at it and educate themselves for 5 minutes, or if it's for somebody to pull down and remix it into a song or put it into a new film, I think with the amount of content just between Rack and I, there's probably 4 or 5 more films that could be made out of that, feature films. So I encourage anyone out there to please do that. But it does take on a life of its own, and I don't think it's going to be a part of my life, and I'm sure it'll be a part of your life forever too.
Yeah, I'd just like to second that and say that, for much of history, the entheogenic or the spiritual experience has been, or at least the one that's mediated through the plant sacraments in Western culture, has been extinguished. It's like they've conquered the old world, we've extinguished their religions that worshipped, the cactus and the mushroom and things like that, and we've repressed it. And we repress spirit, and so it's been carried into the 20th and the 21st century now, where so much of Hollywood and so much of science fiction and fantasy and this deep urge for these transcendental experiences exists in our culture, and we have them represented in commodified ways. Like Star Wars is basically the modern religion in some ways, for a certain demographic. Because it has all the archetypes that we've been denied to fulfill, and without that idea of initiation, we can't become the adults of the tribe, and we're still kept sort of infantile. We're still questing for those archetypes, and so to have authentic experiences, even that aren't sort of Hollywood mediated, but are actually true, like this, and like DMT Spirit Molecule, and like the dozens and potentially hundreds, hopefully, of other content creators out there who have this hunger to, release their archetypes and to tell these mythic stories, which is what all the tribal cultures did. They told these mythic stories which made sense of their world. They anthropomorphized them, perhaps, or they, made sense of their cosmos and their relationships with nature in stories, in myth. And so it's so important for us to make psychedelic and entheogenic and altered states movies, to have these artifacts in the mainstream that then just radiate. They radiate their difference and their intensity and their vibration. And people who see them get, they get a different view on the world, that they're censored. That historical censorship is still, there's this cultural dissonance quite often in the mainstream. And you look at, movies like Avatar, and there's been so many lately, The Fountain, but Hollywood is actually starting to really chase this bleeding edge, which is now, psychedelic, entheogenic, and spiritual, because they've done everything else. They've exhausted the repertoire of what's gone before, and the truth which they've been avoiding for so long is it's the event horizon, we're entering it, and it's getting documented, but it's so important to have these artifacts which can then resonate and change culture, because the visionary art culture, the music culture, electronic music culture, and movies like this, I think, are all collectively making a tapestry of tomorrow, of the new paradigm. And so I feel it's really important that they get out there. Speaking of...
They cut the ayahuasca bug scene out of Avatar, but did anybody see Pacific Rim?
Yes.
Spoiler alert, he merges with the mind of an alien and sees the alien world, and it's like the most accurate DMT trip I have ever seen in cinema, and it was like a $200 million Hollywood film. They nailed it, you guys. Go see that movie.
Pacific Rim.
Pacific Rim, yeah. You just think it's this like blockbuster robots versus monsters thing. But, oh.
Alien versus
No, yeah. I mean, he does it through the machine too, which was like.
One of the your hard drive, if you want to look at it that way.
We have time for one or two more questions, sir.
So when you partake in ayahuasca, do you typically have somebody on hand that either serve the role of a sitter or even a surrogate curandero?
Yeah, you should. Absolutely. You should have someone there. That's the duty of care, and that's the container that is held, the space that is held. You know, there's the indigenous lineage, and one of the reasons why ayahuasca is so popular is because it has lineage. It has people that have been doing this for potentially tens of thousands of years who understand the depth and complexity of it and have a style that is done in a ceremony style that holds space for people. And so that understanding of container and the circle, we call them, ayahuasca circles. That's what you come and join the circle, and it's not in a square, it's in a circle. The moloccas are circular, and the energy travels round. And so it is really important. The curandero, now there's all these sort of like shaman politics down in Iquitos in Peru, where you've got to really read up on the reputation of the shaman, because there's a lot of corruption and egoic sort of issues and lack of duty of care. Mitch and I actually met in Peru at a lodge which had we won't name it, but it had the worst duty of care of any lodge ever. And it was, it was because it was run by Western intent, and they didn't really know what they were doing. And it had a curandero who wasn't really a reputable curandero. And when the duty of care is not there, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And so as Westerners go down to South America and learn the style, a lot of people are adapting it in the West, and they're doing sort of, it's mestizo shamanism usually in Peru anyway, but they're adapting it to a Western-style ceremony. I think it's fine to sort of retrofit and adapt it to the need on the ground in the global village, as long as some of the basics are there. And number one is holding space, protecting the space, looking after people who are going through these experiences. And most of the Westerners who are learning are only 10 to 15, maybe 20 years old, some of the longest practitioners. And they don't have the depth of experience to be a curandero or a shaman. They're not shamans. They're medicine people for the global village, but they're learning as they go. They're still in their apprenticeship. Some people do ayahuasca, and some people do DMT too, a smokable DMT on their own. And you can do that, but the danger is you're not in a held space. You're not in a space, it may lack the sacredness, although the sacredness is within. But it's like stealing a car and driving along and not knowing how to drive or not knowing where to go. I mean, you'll go further, deeper, and safer if you're in a held space in that type of ceremony situation.
We're starting to see that in Western medicine as well. They're doing PTSD studies with MDMA, and they're not looking at just having it in this medical model. They want to make it relax and kind of set up somewhat of a ceremony for you. I mean, it's totally different, but that's the important part. It does. It gives you that container to go out to the farthest reaches and feel safe in doing it. And if you don't have that, even for the experienced psychonaut, if you will, you can get yourself in trouble. So I always think it's important to have somebody.
Typically, with the experienced psychonaut, you do, in context, environmental context, is markedly important. But where I'm kind of interested is we don't have the shaman traditions necessarily. So there seems to be like this kind of, I don't know, there seems to be with the South American practitioners, there's a context that's alien to us. And I know that ultimately we're going to end up creating kind of our own interpretation of their tradition, but I was kind of interested in how that plays out in y'all's life.
I'll switch it to synthetics. I have myself and others that I know have been able to create a ceremony and get some very deep healing and amazing things out of LSD. And it is not about going out and listening to the Grateful Dead and running around. It's about setting up a beautiful space, knowing that you're going to have music that's going to take you along there, and you've got support if need be. And it's a kind of a combination from Shipibo world to even some of the hospital type stuff. And talking to Dr. Strassman and talking to Rick Doblin. our Western mind does not fit in with the Amazonian mind at all. Our worldviews are completely different, and we can try to go down there and shove it down our consciousness, and in some ways it does resonate. But at the same time, they literally move and see the world completely different. So I think it is important to kind of find our way, but be able to do it with others that have been there. There's where the community comes in again. There's a lot of people online that are starting to record not only their trip reports, but hey, here's ways to keep people safe in this environment. And if something like this happens, here are some guidelines. And that's important because these things are going to go away. In fact, I see more and more people using them on a daily basis and seeking them, and it's important, more and more important, to have those things so people don't get left behind. So I would say get online. Arrowwood is a wonderful, wonderful resource. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that. I would highly recommend maps too. And who's putting out that book about guided journeys, essentially? That it's a safety and if you shoot me an email at mitch@thespiritmolecule.com, I'll have that information. But they're putting out like this Bible almost of, from psychiatrists to shamans, psychonauts, everything. It's not Neil though. Anyway, but there is something. It's not James. No. Anyway, shoot me an email. I will find it because mitch@thespiritmolecule.com is an Australian cat.
We got half an hour left in this building, you guys, and I would like to devote at least some of that time to giving everyone the opportunity to mill around and meet one another and chat. But he's been fighting it. Yeah.
Man, I have a triple blessing. I'm a huge fan, and you are a trinity of inspiration.
Oh, man.
Maybe just touch it, breathe on it, whatever.
Can you tell us where this came from?
The octagon, the tesseract, and it started with Manatron's cube, and we work our way up.
There's a tesseract in the middle there.
Does anyone else have a last question?
Thanks, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how has it improved memory? How has it affected memory? You mentioned about how you remember. I'm curious, how does it like memory so important and develops this?
I do think that memory has a lot to do with the complexity of the consciousness that's holding it, and I feel that my psychedelic experiences have been like a mnemonic cross-training, for being able to maintain a rational intellect in an otherwise disturbed cognitive space. And that's definitely helped with respect to being able to hold a concept or a memory across contexts and through experiences. I was told by a friend of mine who works with DMT on a regular basis that there are certain herbs, like Bacopa, there's one in particular that he takes to enhance his ability to remember the content of his experiences. There are a number of safe nootropic substances, herbs that you can use, but in general, I would say that neuro-linguistic programming is another one. Learning to associate a memory with with more than one sensory channel. I think it was I can't remember who said it, but she's like, if every name in your phone book had a smell associated with it, you'd remember everybody's phone number so much more easily. And so there are certain mnemonic devices that I've learned to work with, that I've intentionally engaged, in the psychedelic state and embraced. But I don't think that it's like, with the car metaphor, it's a technology that can be used, or you can just burn yourself on it. And I don't think it's I don't think it inherently improves your memory. I think that that's something that you really have to move with deliberately.